Everything is so expensive right now, and it's literally by the grace of God that me and my family are surviving.
And now we're living in a dream that involves paying $10 for a dozen of shitty f***ing eggs, paying $2,000 a month for an apartment in the ghetto that's about 700 square feet and it has no walls.
Forget the image of wealthy America you once knew. Because in the richest country in the world, 1 in 7 adults doesn't know what they'll have for dinner tomorrow. You heard right. A country that spends $877 billion on defense cannot ensure a full meal for millions of its citizens. While corporations are reporting record profits, food prices increased by 11% in just 1 year, twice the rate of wage growth. And American workers who built this nation have to count every penny. If this is the land of opportunity, why does the American dream now begin with an empty shopping cart? And if an empty refrigerator has become the new normal, we must ask ourselves, what else of the American dream has yet to be taken away? In this video, we'll peel back the layers, from salaries and prices to policies, to uncover the truth the government doesn't want you to know. It's not just poverty, but also the machine that has turned poverty into destiny. In a recent CBS News survey, 2 to 3 of Americans said they are stressed about finances. 3/4 say their income hasn't kept pace with inflation. A lot of people are struggling to make ends meet day by day. Many people say Americans are working more than ever and are still hungry. Sounds paradoxical, doesn't it? But that's the truth happening on every street corner in America. Do you know? Nearly 60% of adults in the US currently live paycheck to paycheck, meaning their salary disappears as soon as it arrives. It's not because they spend wastefully. They spend on the most basic things: rent, gas, and medicine. And in the end, the refrigerator is still empty. About 2/3 of people receiving government food assistance are actually employed. They're not sitting idle. They are not lazy. They still work every day, sometimes 2, even 3 jobs, and still have to line up at the food bank every weekend. Michelle Bojali, 37, a teacher in St. Louis County, Minnesota, shared, "I've been teaching since 2008. This profession isn't about money, it's about love. But that's precisely why many people like me have to work 2 jobs just to make ends meet. When the price of eggs and bacon went up, we had to eat cereal every morning to save money. After class, she has to deliver food for DoorDash for a few hours. Each order is only about $4.50 plus tip. The mother also said she had to try to save every penny. Sometimes I even dared to eat my child's leftovers to save money." She added, "The people who make decisions for us are mostly wealthy. They don't understand the feeling of working 2 jobs or having to buy gas with coins. If they understood that ordinary people are fighting every day just to survive, perhaps they would make fairer decisions." The average salary in the US has long seemed to fail to keep pace with the cost of living. The federal minimum wage has remained at $7.25 hours since 2009, meaning for over a decade, everything has increased, except income. During that time, rental prices increased by over 30%. Healthcare is an additional 40%. Not to mention the actual costs of food and other living expenses. And so a full-time job is now only enough to pay the bills, not enough to live on. In 2009, an hour's work could buy about 5 pounds of beef. Now, the same amount of work will only buy you 2 pounds. With the same effort and time, the dinner is smaller and has less protein. And if a grown man has to stand in front of a shelf to choose between a package of meat and a tank of gas, it's clear this is no longer a personal story, it's a structural issue. So the question is, if working is still not enough to eat, still not enough to live, then who are we working for after all? And why does the world's #1 economy operate as if scarcity is the default? Perhaps the answer lies in something bigger than wages, the game that makes everything else more expensive. And that's what we'll decode in the next part. In the media, it's still being said that inflation in the US has cooled down. But the reality is that prices are still nearly 24% higher than before the pandemic. Olivia Marino Carlson, 70, who lives in Santa Fe, New Mexico, shared that after paying rent, she had less than $200 left to live on. She said, "I can't retire. Social Security benefits aren't enough to cover expenses, so I still have to look for work. I've worked my whole life, but now I can't enjoy my old age. That's heartbreaking." She used to work in retail and carry heavy loads despite her advanced age. Every day she goes to the library to look for work online. "I applied to Walgreens but haven't heard back yet. Food prices increase every time we blink. Now, she only buys where it's cheaper." Food prices increased by an average of over 11% in 2022 alone, the highest level since 1979. Some essential items have even jumped by 30–40%. No salary is fast enough to keep up with this pace. And the bitter truth is, the people struggling with grocery bills are the very ones who once believed that working hard would be enough to live on. Why did the price increase so drastically? The answer isn't just the pandemic or shipping costs. It's a whole domino effect. The post-COVID supply chain is disrupted, and logistics costs are skyrocketing. Rising fuel prices are driving up costs at every stage, from the farm to the supermarket. And the giant food corporations, which control most of the value chain, don't hesitate to keep record profits while people cut back on every meal. Does that sound familiar? It's a bit like filling up your gas tank and realizing that a third of that amount is profit for oil companies. What about the consequences? It's not just a number on a bill. It's the battle in every family's kitchen. Retirees living on fixed incomes are being swept away by rising prices. My pension hasn't increased, but a box of milk is now $2 more expensive. Middle-class families are forced to cut back on fresh food. Fresh vegetables give way to canned goods. Fresh meat turned into frozen hot dogs. And low-income families, they have no other choice. Dinner is often just ramen and sandwiches. In 2025, inflation in the US is no longer a dry economic concept. It's an empty refrigerator. It's the feeling of sighing at the checkout counter. It's that moment when you stand in front of the beef display, look at the price tag, and wonder, do I really need to eat meat this week? The most bitter thing is, the system calls this a market signal. But for millions of people, it's a sign of an empty stomach. And what makes people angry isn't the price increase itself. It's the feeling of helplessness when they can't control it. When everything from bread to gasoline is escalating faster than wages. Working hard is no longer a way out. It's just a way to survive. So the question is, if you can't afford food even when you work, and prices keep rising regardless of your efforts, is this still an economy that serves people? But even if there's money and prices go down, millions of Americans still won't be able to access food. Why? The answer lies in the map that supermarkets never want you to see. You can buy cigarettes on every street corner, but to buy fresh vegetables, you have to drive for 20 minutes. Doesn't that sound strange? But that's the reality for millions of Americans every day. Welcome to the food desert, a place where fresh food is almost non-existent. According to the USDA, over 19 million Americans are living in this situation. These aren't remote, isolated areas. Many are right in the middle of major cities. They just don't appear on the profit maps of retail corporations. Why did this absurd thing happen? The simple answer: money. Large supermarket chains avoid low-income areas because of thin profit margins. They chose to open a store where people buy organic products at double the price, rather than where every penny is carefully calculated. And when there are no supermarkets, people without cars, who are often also poor, are stuck. They rely on small, independent stores where an apple can cost twice as much as at a supermarket, and fresh vegetables are as rare as July snow in Arizona. The consequences aren't just limited to the meal. Cheaper foods are often canned, containing sugar, fat, and salt, leading to obesity, diabetes, and heart disease. As health declines and medication costs increase, that means food expenses continue to decrease. The vicious cycle tightened, turning a food issue into a public health problem. In Detroit, a neighborhood of over 12,000 people has no major supermarkets within a 3-mile radius. A resident said, "I had to choose between paying $20 for a taxi to Walmart or eating instant noodles for another week." And this is the most thought-provoking part. Society celebrates freedom of choice, but for millions, the only options are high prices, poor quality, and bad health. In other words, the so-called free market isn't free at all. At least not free for your stomach. A middle-class family in the suburbs might choose between 12 types of vegetables and 6 types of meat. A poor family in the city centre is choosing between 2 types of instant noodles. Their so-called supermarket is a 24/7 store where salad is a rare find in the refrigerator. And the bigger question is this just a matter of distance? Or is it a system that deliberately abandons communities that don't generate profit? And if we live in a country where burgers can be delivered by drone in 15 minutes, why do millions of people still have to travel 10 miles to buy a tomato? But you know what? Food deserts are only the physical part of the story. The next part will be even more uncomfortable, when the very welfare policies unintentionally keep the poor trapped in this vicious cycle. Over time, you will lose your benefits. Do less, you'll be hungry. Welcome to the welfare trap. If you think welfare is a safety net for the poor to climb to the next level of life, think again. In reality, it often feels like a rope tying them to the bottom. The harder they try, the tighter the rope gets. The story begins with what seems like a small number. The SNAP program, America's largest food assistance program, provides an average of about $6 per person per day. Not much, but enough to fill the gap between hunger and fullness. The problem is, if you earn just a few dollars more per hour, you could lose all of that support. The result? Millions of Americans face a bitter paradox. Working harder can make them poorer. Here's how the trap works. The welfare system is designed based on income thresholds. If you're below the threshold, you receive support. And if you exceed the limit, even by just, the subsidy could disappear completely. And this creates an absurdity called the welfare cliff, a welfare abyss. Workers calculated and realized that working an extra 5 hours per week could cause them to lose hundreds of dollars in food stamps, childcare, healthcare, etc. The benefits package was completely cut, and net income after promotion was less than before. Maria, a single mother in Florida, was offered an hour raise. Sounds like good news. But if she accepts, she'll lose $400 a month in SNAP benefits, the amount currently feeding her 2 children. She refused. It's not because I'm lazy, but because of a simple calculation. Pride can't be put in my child's soup bowl. The long-term impact is difficult to measure. It could be a family that doesn't dare to take on extra hours or learn new skills because they're already at their limit. It could be a worker stuck at the bottom, right where the system promised to pull them out. Worse, children can grow up in poverty not because their parents don't try, but because their efforts lead nowhere. We call this a safety net, but for many people, it's a spider web. Once they fall in, they get stuck in that exact spot. And society looks at them with judgmental eyes. Why aren't they moving forward, while the very laws had erected an invisible wall before them? According to an analysis by the Congressional Budget Office, nearly 25% of low-wage workers said they had turned down promotions or overtime because they were afraid of losing benefits. That's not laziness, it's a survival strategy. And then we have to ask ourselves, is welfare really helping the poor get back on their feet? Or is it keeping them bowed down forever? If the system rewards staying still and punishes moving forward, then poverty is no longer a personal choice. It's a design. And you, What would you do if every step forward in life meant losing your lifeline? Do you dare to move forward, or will you stay in a safe place? But the story doesn't end there. When millions are trapped in the system, the consequences are not just poverty, it's a social time bomb ticking down, and that's the sequel. History teaches us one thing. Every empire can fall when the people no longer have enough to eat. And the scariest part is, America is getting closer to that line than ever before. Look at the current picture. Americans today have to spend over 13% of their income just to buy food. The highest figure in over 30 years. Food thefts in supermarkets are surging from New York to San Francisco. And in 2023, over 1.2 million students in the US were considered homeless. These are no longer just a few scattered stories. They seem to be a signal of a society stretched to its limits. The mechanism is very simple. When people cannot meet their most basic needs, to eat their fill, they will no longer care about laws, politics, or promising speeches. Trust in the system collapsed, and that void was quickly filled by anger and even the risk of extremism. Let's remember history. Not every revolution starts with speeches. Most of them start with rising bread prices. In Los Angeles, dozens of community fridges have sprung up on street corners every place. People voluntarily leave free food for anyone who needs it. It sounds beautiful and humane. But think deeper. A society that prides itself on being the richest on the planet, yet has to rely on refrigerators placed on the sidewalk to feed the poor. That's no longer kindness. That's a sign of a system that's cracking. The ripple effect of hunger is even more concerning than we thought. The middle class is starting to fear. They are spending less and slowing down the economic engine. The elderly are worried about the future, withdrawing their savings and putting pressure on the financial system. Politicians began to exploit the anger, turning poverty into a campaign weapon. Hunger is no longer a problem for the unemployed. It became a problem for the entire economy. We pour billions of dollars into the defense budget each year to protect the nation from external threats, while what could make society more alarmed is left in an empty basket. A country that can send people to Mars but struggles to ensure lunch for public school children. Think about when a pressure cooker is heated, the internal pressure will gradually increase. Initially, you only heard a slight hissing sound, but if it doesn't release pressure, it will explode. America is the same today. That pot is society itself, and the pressure is increasing every time food prices tick up a few cents. The final question is no longer, do the poor have enough to eat? But rather, how much longer will this society last before empty stomachs become the trigger? If hunger and thirst can shake civilizations that have existed for thousands of years, do you believe it will spare America? And as the empty shopping cart began to symbolize the era, perhaps we were not only facing an economic crisis, but also a crisis of trust and social justice. We can't change the wind, but we can adjust the sails. And amidst the storm of rising prices, poverty, and social unrest, there are still ways for Americans to protect themselves and prepare for the future. Don't just live, plan to live well. In a volatile economy, budgeting is no longer a small matter. Keep track of your weekly expenses to know exactly where your money is going. Transition from emotional spending to strategic spending. Prioritize essential foods and cut out unnecessary luxuries. Shop smarter. Hunt for deals. Buy seasonally. Use coupons. And take advantage of local produce. A study by NerdWallet shows that by simply planning shopping and preparing meals in advance, a family can save an average of 20–25% on food costs each month. Redefining safety, starting with autonomy. You don't need to live like a 19th century farmer, but growing your own vegetables at home, participating in food exchange communities, or collaborating with neighbors to buy wholesale food are effective ways to reduce dependence on the volatile price system. In fact, seemingly old-fashioned skills like cooking at home or planning weekly menus are the most powerful economic vaccines in times of inflation. Don't forget community engagement, because no one survives alone. In many cities, community pantry or food co-op models not only help reduce food costs, but also rebuild trust among residents. When many people share resources together, costs decrease, strength increases. The American dream doesn't end with an overly high grocery bill or an empty refrigerator. It starts again. Every time people learn to stand together, speak out together, and regain control of their own lives. The question is, will you wait for others to change everything, or will you start adjusting your sails today? You may never have had to choose between a carton of eggs and a tank of gas, but that day may not be far off. This crisis is not just about the poor. It is a test for an entire society, whether we can still maintain our compassion, fairness, and ability to stand together. And now, I'd like to hear your thoughts. In your opinion, what is the deepest root cause of millions of Americans not having enough money to buy food? What is the most practical solution for us to escape this cycle? Please leave a comment below so we can discuss together. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell to avoid missing deeper analysis videos on American socio-economic issues that mainstream media often avoids. The content of this video is personal analysis and commentary and is not intended to attack any individual, organization, or government. All data and opinions cited are for educational purposes, discussion, and to inform the audience.